Thanks, Mina. I think this actually works pretty well because some of the things you mentioned now, I want to pick up again. And I think often when we talk about women in ICT, higher education or engineering, we talk about it that the people who are actually now students are the same people, or we assume that they are the same like 20 or 30 years ago. That actually the students have the same needs, the same outlook of life than it was 30 years ago. And I think this is not necessarily the case, and that although the surface, or well, it's a deep problem, but the problem we are talking about, that there is an underrepresentation of women in ICT, actually what is underlying that the students we're talking about here are actually quite different. And I think this might be a good way or good point to talk about with the academic staff, because the problems they face are changing as well. So what I'm going to present here is basically a part of our empirical work we did over the last 2 years. And I want to present how the reactions of university staff in telecommunications and computer science here in Spain has changed towards new profiles of incoming students. So the problems that arise there, and what are the challenges and the possibilities as well for those careers. No, you don't say careers in English, you say degrees. You say careers in Spanish. So a little bit of the background of the project. The project is called the Incorporation of Women into Telecommunications and Computer Science Higher Education. This was part of the Plan Avanza de Género from 2008 to 2010. And what we basically did, we did several case studies here in the universities. You see, it's the Universidad Politécnica de Catalunya. It's the Polytechnic University here in Catalonia. Then there is the Polytechnic University in Madrid, Carlos III in Madrid, and the Universidad Autónoma here in Barcelona. And in each of these universities, we went into telecommunications and computer science. And in each of the faculties here, we choose the two most important departments they had in terms of history, in terms of teaching staff, and selected three teachers. Often this was the head of the department, then sort of in the middle, professor titular, associate professor, I think you call this in English, and one or two associate professor, or there could also be one level below, which is professor lector. But you see, from all academic levels in the department, we took people. And we made semi-structured interviews, overall 42 in all those universities. And we also interviewed administrative staff of those universities. We did 6 interviews. And apart from that, we did focus groups with students with a total of 67 students. So this is a little bit to give you an idea of the empirical base of this study. Now, we had this graphic yesterday already in one of the talks. I just want to mention, this is the distribution of female degree students across disciplines here in Spain for the year 2006 and 2007. And I think you can see pretty well a familiar picture that actually women are the majority across all fields except for engineering. Now, when we went to the conference, meta-analysis conference 2 weeks ago, Daniel Moilders, who is one of the authors of the She Figures for Europe, she really insisted that the problem here is not that there are few women in engineering, but it's the other way around, that actually few men are concentrated in some disciplines when women are much more the majority in a broader field of disciplines. So the problem, we have to pose it in terms of why do men flock around very few disciplines instead of women. So there has been some change. This is not to say that other problems like the pay gap or the vertical segregation have disappeared. No, they are very persistent, but in this case, I think it's interesting to mention this. Now, when we look at individual university, and here this is the Polytechnic University, we see that actually the national average, let's say, looks much worse. I mean, the UPC is the second biggest, largest university in Spain, technical university. And if you look at computer science, you know, we are below 10% now of women students. And in telecommunications, well, it's a little bit better, but it's still the lowest compared to all the others. I mean, math, architecture is actually half and half. So just to give you an idea. Then this graphic shows that actually the overall absolute numbers of students in Spain has declined. If you compare this from 99 to 2006, so it's going down. Probably we expect that with the crisis more people go back again into higher education, but this was the picture over the recent years. And this is important because it reflects what is going on in individual universities. This is again the UPC with declining enrollment rates. And if you look at telecommunications or computer science, is actually quite similar, but with a stronger drop. So there are less and less students going into this degrees. And this is, first of all, important if you you have to consider that here exists like a numerus clausus. So it means that there's a national test, la selectividad, which all students have to take, which want to go on to the higher education, and the grade you get there determines where you can enter, depending on the available study places in the universities. So if many students want to go in one line which only has a few places, the grades, el numerus clausus, goes up. So you can only get in if you have very good grades, let's say. What happened here, you see that as the enrollment rates of students actually went down, the numerus clausus also went down, and 5 is the minimum. So if you are below 5, you actually don't get the test. You know, you fail the test. So this means from 2002 basically onwards, even if you just make the test, the selectividad, the national test, you can get into telecommunications and computer science, and a lot of others as well. So this is important because all of a sudden, where faculty was used to have quite good students in the past, now they face a very different set of students. And this is, well, this is the graph for the UPC telecommunications, but it's similar from the interviews. As I will explain now, it's quite similar in other departments, in other faculties, but I mean, they have very nice statistics online, so it was easier to get it from them. So as I mentioned, this produces a very different student profile coming into telecommunications and computer science, and this slide actually reflects what staff told us. It's not that we made a questionnaire and took an objective test, which type of people are coming in. No, this is what staff told us, and they told us that, well, students who are coming to our faculty, they lack mathematics and physics skills. I mean, this is important because usually the first years of those studies are very abstract. That's where the theoretical subjects are concentrated. So the idea usually is that people get mathematics and physics foundation for later on their, well, it's a generic foundation engineers are supposed to have. And this, I mean, it's hard to get into the university anyway as a student. So there's a level, there's a jump, there's a higher degree of what they demand from you. But in the same time, now that students are actually worse, let's say the results of this are much more emphasized or much stronger visible, let's say. And this would be okay if at least the students would be willing to work, but neither are they willing to work, they say. I mean, you know, they just come here and expect it would be, you know, a walk in the park, but when it's not like that. So there's a certain culture of immediacy. They say, you know, they want everything and they want it now, and, you know, they don't know how to work, how to put a sustained effort in those studies. So they're quite dissatisfied. And this was a theme that really ran through all the interviews we did. No, I mean, we got to read quite a few of interviews, and very soon there was a point of saturation where I think, okay, I mean, you know, it's the same. And I mean, I really want to see this as there comes to the front a certain masculine image of ICT engineering. I mean, in the past, what was the sense of those first years? It was really to weed out the students. There were a lot of students incoming, and they had actually the luxury, you know, we only want the best. And we were going to make sure that only the best stay. But since that has changed quite a bit, I mean, there's still this image of it's really a hard degree. Everybody says it's a hard degree. It's a long-distance effort. It's not a 100-meter sprint, they said. But this really it becomes a sign of identity. You know, it's a hardship. Without this sort of suffering in the beginning, we're not really going to have good engineers. And I just want to read you a little quote from one of the interviews, which said, "I still remember my former physics professor. He said to me, 'Once you got your degree, the companies will not contract us for what we know, but for the capacity to suffer we had developed during our 6 years of studies. Any company would value that.' And I did not forget that since, well, that's actually quite a long time ago, 96. So, I mean, it's an extreme quote in this sense, but I think it transmits a grain of truth that in order to become an engineer, you have to suffer in a way in the beginning, and especially in the beginning. And I think this also comes to the fore very well in how people were talking about the Bologna process, sort of the danger of the Bologna process. I mean, yesterday we were talking about that telecommunications and computer science and engineering has changed. It's much more service-oriented, and many people admit this. You know, they say, yeah, it's true. We're moving towards a service-oriented type of work. But at the same time, when they start talking about, let's say, pedagogy or curriculum, you sense that it's not so straightforward. So Bologna means, in a way, that evaluation is going to be continuous. So instead of having one final exam, it's going to be several exams along the course. And they said that, well, you know, the danger is that it's too much guidance. You know, we're going to delay maturity. And I want to quote. I mean, what came often up was, you know, students come to you, and it's actually good that they come, and they have lost a little bit of respect to come and talk to you. But I'm not your mother. You know, I'm not going to deal with all your stuff. And one said, if we hold their hands and act as if they would still be in school, in the end, life will slap them into the face. Instead of getting slapped here in the faculty, they will be slapped in life. What we will create is light engineering. So that's the danger of the continuous evaluation. I think we also have to understand that there's a lot of pressure on faculty as well. They get evaluated for research, for the funding they attract. They don't get evaluated for the teaching. So it's not an essential part of their career. continuous evaluation means they have to put a lot of more effort and time into teaching, which is not rewarded in a sense. So they feel sort of reticent. Thanks. And it's understandable that they reject it. But it also shows, the image of what is engineering. The other thing is transversal competences, teamwork, communicative skills, all these competences which are a part of the Bologna process as well. And they said, well, now everybody becomes Bolognianized or part of Bologna. Let's say I'm not sure that we will regret it one day and miss the other type of professional who was able to manage and figure it all out by himself. So and another one said, they know how to work in group, but do they know how to make useful products? There might be a problem. So if we have transversal competencies, actually what's going to happen is that people might be able to do great work together, but it's not going to be good engineering. And what this shows, I think, is that it goes against the established self-image of engineering. You have to be autonomous, you have to be efficient, self-directed. You're going to be a hero who usually is successful in facing any kind of situation, and manage it by himself. So at the same time, this sort of masculine image of traditional engineering goes hand in hand with a very weak concern for gender. I mean, we heard this yesterday as well, that there is equality plans have been established in Spain. It's a requirement actually for universities and bigger companies. And this gives a sense of, we have done our duty. These plans have been elaborated. They're there. Equal opportunity is a fact, and we don't have to look any further. Especially in the academic world where meritocracy, is the law. No, the rejection to positive discrimination was as extended as was present in all the interviews as well. We don't want this. We don't want to be singled out. In a way, it's the same. In the same way, they said, the rational and functional self-understanding is beyond of gender. I mean, many quotes said, I don't care about differences between men or women as long as engineers that graduate from this university function well. I'm beyond of that. I think we try to get our work done here. I never take notice if I assign this class to a man or a woman when people were asked actually how they distribute the classes. It's a very instrumental self-understanding which actually doesn't care about gender. And I think I'm coming back here to what you said, that they understand themselves as problem solvers. It's also a recurrent theme all the interviews, which is actually pretty at odds with feminist concerns for problem definition. I wouldn't say necessarily to understand problems, but to define problems. What is a problem? I mean, there was this good example in the meta-analysis conference as well of, crash test dummies for pregnant. Are there pregnant crash test dummies? Is this a problem? No, it's not a problem because it was not perceived as a problem. So there's really a mismatch between an understanding that a problem is self-evident, given, you just have to solve it, or actually, it depends how you define it. What is a problem? For whom? And then there's the important point of the numerical underrepresentation. I mean, there are few women in these degrees, and what this means that actually the women students who come to telecommunication and computer science, they are very good because they know what they want to do. I mean, they have to be sure about themselves. I really want to do this because it's an atypical career choice. So they are actually quite invisible because the actual problem they face right now is bad students, bad boys. I don't know, but so they go pretty much unperceived, the girls there, and at the same time, because there's of course very few women at the top, and Professor Catedrático in the top position, they actually can explain this because, you know, there are few at the bottom, so there are few at the top. If they would be in other disciplines where there is a 50% income and only, let's say, 20 or less 10% female professors at the top, they would see, you know, this is another problem involved here. But because there are few, they can say, you know. So what this really gets down to in the end is that gender is not a problem. It goes pretty much unperceived there through this particular situation. Okay, so what I really want to argue for is that there are changes in student lifestyles and learning habits, and what this means, I want to bring this down to, you know, there's this argument that the generation which has grown up with communication technology, mobile phones, the internet, really has different expectations of how to learn, what they expect in front of a computer than previous generations. Like the formal education normally we know is long attention spans, reflective activities, focusing intensely on one activity, whereas now it's really more, you know, you're at ease with multitasking, you give priority to images, and I think in a way this is also what they experience in the faculty. And this goes also in hand. This is a slide from a book forthcoming on the culture of science and how it is accepted and viewed by young people. And what you see here is that the higher the living standard is, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, the less likely actually people are to go into engineering. So they don't see it as a necessity, you know, normal life, it's solved. You don't see, it doesn't make a difference to be a creator of technology. So I think this changes in a generation, which really was a bit quick now, is a problem which is going to stay. But there is no guarantee actually that this new need staff experiences at the university will incorporate a gender perspective, as they have to diversify and modify their teaching and curriculum. As we've seen here in the telecommunication, usually this is not the case. I mean, it goes pretty much unperceived. And I think the way to address gender here is not to say, you know, engineering has to take into account a gender perspective, but it's rather the problem you have will be best addressed from a gender perspective. That's it.